Okay. Can you hear me now? Is it better?
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Good evening. It sounds like if it's going like in and out. All right. So tonight is a short night because I know you all know all about compliance. Did you get the handout I sent?
I saw some things come through a little while ago, but
A little while ago.
Which handout are you referring to, first of all? The one that Miguel sent today?
Yes. Yes, you should have it. Yes. So today we're going to talk about customer due diligence and mainly talking about how persons launder money through real estate transactions. So I know you all must have some stories and you probably be thinking as we go through like the red flags, things that may have come across your desk and you probably didn't realize it, or some that actually occurred. So everybody knows the definition of money laundering, correct? Yes.
But like I said on the anecdotes, so my clients don't get exposed.
No, you don't have to give names, but if it sounds familiar, you could say it sounds familiar. So we know that money laundering is an actual process, and it's where criminals try to conceal the true origin and ownership of the proceeds of their criminal activities. And if you read the latest US narcotics report, you'll see that the Bahamas is still in that report. They still say that we are laundering money through different predicate offenses. And that is something that we have to watch out for. I know that real estate is really one of the hot areas that they're looking into, in addition to human smuggling and gun smuggling. So money launderers, what they try to do is to take the illicit funds, clean it up, and bring it back out into society. So the money launderer, their main objective from, which means which criminal activity. And then what they do is to make sure it cannot be pointed back at them. And in order to accomplish this, they disguise their own identity. In other jurisdictions, they have what they call a straw man, someone who the criminals and someone who has a clean record. And so they hide their ownership and their own identity, and then they manage and control the whole process. So there are 3 stages of money laundering. There's placement, and that's the physical disposal of the cash itself. Then there's layering, and that's soliciting the proceeds from their source by creating layers. And that disguises the true identity of the source of funds. And of course, integration. And that's where it actually goes back out into the financial arena as legitimate funds. The commission of the 3 stages of money laundering is not necessary for an individual to be prosecuted for the offense of money laundering. If it can be proven that the person has contributed to the money laundering process by knowing or suspecting that the source of the funds were launderers' funds, or they have been criminally derived, then that means that they have participated in the money laundering process or one of the stages of it. A financial institution has to always consider the money laundering risk that is posed by either the services that they offer or the products that they offer. And what you also have to do is be able to identify what are the risks inherent in those products and services that you offer. And so those the risks that are inherent in those products and services and what makes it vulnerable to be used in one of the stages of money laundering. So under the Proceeds of Crime Act, they define what they call identified risk offenses. So under the act, it says that corruption, cybercrime, human trafficking, money laundering, or the financing of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, or financing of terrorism, or any other risk that may be prescribed are all predicate offenses under the Proceeds of Crime Act. So the act goes further to talk about, to outline the offenses identified as money laundering. And the first one is concealing. A person commits an offense of money laundering if acting with knowledge or reasonable suspicion that they conceal the proceeds of crime, they disguise it, convert it, transfer it, or remove it from the Bahamas. That's an offense. If you know, suspect, or ought to have reason that you have entered or you're about to enter into an arrangement which will facilitate, by whatever means, the acquisition, the use, concealment, or the control of proceeds of crime by or on behalf of another person. It also is an offense if you acquisition, use, and possess the proceeds of crime. So this is when a person commits or suspects or ought to reasonably have known that they acquired or they are acquiring the proceeds of crime, used or is using the proceeds of crime, or they have possessed or possess the proceeds of crime. So there's also, it's also an offense if you fail to disclose. Failing to disclose to the FIU or to the police that one knows or you suspect or you reasonably ought to have known or suspected that another person is engaged in money laundering or committing an offense related to any one of those identified risks, that the information or other matter on which your knowledge or suspicion is based gives you reasonable grounds for such knowledge or suspicion, and it came to you in the course of your doing your normal business, and that one does not make the required disclosure as soon as is practicable after the information or other matter comes to the person, then that is an offense. It is also an offense if a money laundering reporting officer fails to disclose to the FIU. And it says that if the money laundering reporting officer knows or suspects, for knowing or suspecting that another person is engaged in money laundering or an identified risk activity, any information from an alleged offender on which the knowledge or suspicion of the money laundering reporting officer is based, or which gives reasonable grounds for such knowledge or suspicion, and the money laundering reporting officer does not make the required disclosure as soon as practicable after the information or other matter comes to their attention. So an offense is committed if you know or suspect that any disclosure under Part 2 of the Proceeds of Crime Act has been made or an action has been taken by the FIU in relation to anything under Part 2 of the Proceeds of Crime Act. And one makes a disclosure to another person, which is likely to prejudice any investigation which might be conducted following the disclosure made. So that means that you cannot tip off anyone when you suspect or know or have reasonable suspicion. So there are some legal requirements for customer due diligence under the Financial Transaction Reporting Act. That act outlines the customer due diligence measures, and also in the regulations. They outline the requirements under the Bahamian law for individual entities, trusts, and other legal arrangements, partnerships, or unincorporated business for the. So pursuant to the act, it is mandatory that financial institutions conduct a risk assessment to identify, assess, and understand the identified risk related to their clients, the countries or jurisdictions of their origin, the countries and jurisdiction where they operate, the products and services they offer, the transactions and the delivery channels. Under Section 7 of the Act, it mandates that financial institutions identify the identity of a facility holder by means of verifying reliable, independent source, documents, data, or information. That they identify and verify the identity of any person purporting to act on behalf of a facility holder, and verify that such person is properly authorized to act in that capacity. Understand as appropriate, obtain information on the purpose and intended nature of the business relationship, including the ownership and control structure of the facility holder. Identify and verify the beneficial owner of a facility, and if corporate, the beneficial owners of 10% or more controlling interest. The regulation states the mandatory documents required by financial institutions to verify the existence of a facility holder. Simplified due diligence is conducted on facility holder identified as low risk, unless there is a suspicion of activity related to an identified risk in which enhanced due diligence is required. Now, there are some money laundering warning signs. First one, you could have a reluctance by the facility holder to provide information or to provide their ID. You could have incomplete or insufficient information from a facility holder. You could have some kind of unusual behavior and requests from the facility holder. You can have offers of large cash payment to get things moving along quickly by a facility holder. You could have unusually large deposits to put down on a house that they are purchasing, which could further raise your suspicion. And if you're unable to identify the source of their deposit, that could also raise a red flag, not only for you as the financial institution, but also to the regulators. So KYC and customer due diligence. Enhanced due diligence. A financial institution is required to conduct enhanced customer due diligence to business relationship or transaction with facility holders or beneficial owners or financial institutions from a jurisdiction assessed by the Identified Risk Framework Steering Committee, and such enhanced measures are proportionate to the risk identified. Financial institution is required to examine as far as possible the background and purpose of all complex, unusually large transactions and all unusual patterns of transactions which have no apparent economic or visible purposes. A financial institution is also required to mitigate against the risk identified with respect of facility holders, beneficial owners, or financial institutions assessed as high risk. So you know the group of financial regulators sent out their directives and notice today. Anyone want to share what that notice or directive said? Or what it concerned? No one is aware. It was in the newspapers.
Do you mean that the cutoff from Russia?
Yes, the sanctions.
Right.
Okay, so how would that impact business here in the Bahamas?
I mean, any contracts that any Bahamian individuals, be it persons or companies may have, they can't continue that with those stationed in Russia. And should they do it, continue any relations,
Yeah.
they would be non-compliant?
Yes, they would be non-compliant, but it is not just the clients, but it's also any transactions that fall under any of the sanctions by those countries that issued sanctions. So that means that if you have a client may not have to be a Russian. The client can be from any jurisdiction. But if they intend to be involved in any of the sanctioned activities by Canada, United States, Australia, any of the EU countries, then they will be non-compliant. And that's addition to the list of the names of all the oligarchs and all of the Russian entities, state-owned entities.
You know what I don't understand in connection with this whole thing that you're referring to right now?
There's no,
Even though they have us or they said that we
go
are
ahead.
going to be compliant with the sanction list, or we're sanctioning Russia. How if we hadn't jumped on board with everybody else in connection with that, what would have actually happened, or what could have happened to us?
Now that part, I don't know what could have happened, because then you had the pressure from the United States, and we also had the pressure from Russia.
See,
And
the
who's
thing,
allied?
right, and that's the thing right there, because everybody is saying that we should jump on board to sanction, and my thing is, we're a little country. Our little sanctions ain't really gonna affect anything that happened with respect to Russia. Now, if we hadn't jumped on board, what would have been the realistically speaking, what could they have done to us, or what they have done to us?
Well,
because go
don't
ahead.
forget, United States is our ally. United States had already said, we being so close to them, knowing that the Russian ambassador is in Cuba, they themselves, the Russian ambassador, had already sent his comments in the newspaper last week also, saying that they are here to support us in any humanitarian needs that we want, right after the United States came out. So now we have to stand on the side of our allies. Who's going to help us in trouble? Who helps us when the going is good, and who helps us when the going is bad? And our ally is the United States.
See, the thing is, what they have. See, the thing. I mean, I got all of that, right? They had an issue. They have an issue with all of that. But again, I and any event, that's just an opinion. So I'm just trying to figure out what would have happened if we didn't jump on board. Because for clarity, because at the end of the day, I'd like to know.
None of us knows what's going to happen. None of us knows that by now saying that we have issued these sanctions, we don't know what Putin is going to do, because he says that anyone who issues sanctions against him is an enemy. We don't know. But right now, the whole world, except for those few countries who are dependent on Russia for their natural gas and their oil, and those who are actual of the same mindset as him, they're the only ones who are on his side.
So one other thing now,
Go ahead.
bearing all of that in mind now, that we have said that we're going to stand with the U.S. and sanction Russia. Be mindful now that the Chinese, at the end of the day, is also a big part of Russia. I mean, is also supporting Russia, and that's also one of our allies, or one of the persons or countries that also support us and help us.
I agree.
So the
But-
question now,
But remember now, Kwame, the Minister of Foreign Affairs is the first one who jumped out with his speech. He came out and he said, part of Ukraine. He came up publicly and he sent that out worldwide.
right, right. No, I understand, but you be mindful at the end of the day, you know, whereas you appeasing one, you're hurting someone else.
Agreed.
And those same
Agreed.
ones who are at the end of the day right now, who pumping the US may be your ally, but they're not pumping the kind of money into this economy like right now as the Chinese is.
Yes. But I mean, you all are prepared to go to war.
Yeah, I prepared to send the defense force and my 2 cannon. But hello,
Yes.
Ms. Archer? Yeah, Ms.
I'm
Archer,
here.
but again, it still comes back down to the same thing. You then said you then still sorry sorry Darius, you then still have the same thing. You have us now playing a world game, whereas we're caught in the middle of everybody. You
Yes.
understand? Because the majority of our money and our support come right now, like I said, is coming from basically the Chinese and their investments into the Bahamas. You understand? The US at the end of the day, yes, they help, or yes, they have invested a lot into the country. But again, right now, from what I see and from what I am remembering, I could be wrong. The majority of investments right now is still coming from the Chinese.
Mm. But remember now, this decision that they made over the weekend came from the powers that be.
Again, yes, but we still playing a touchy game here because again, so you're saying that we supposed to sanction the Chinese also because they do business with Russia.
No, Canada.
And they're not the ones who, and they're not sanctioning Russia. They're actually supporting them because
Yes,
I think, right, because I think they also have something that they have up their sleeve in another couple of months or a couple of years where they want to go in and get I think another where there's anyway where they want to go try capture some territory for themselves also.
Yes, yes. Because they're already up in the Icelandic, what they call it, Icelandic states, trying to stake claim up there.
Right.
So this is all about gaining territory and getting access to minerals and whatever else they
And
can.
resources, yes, ma'am.
And yes. But I agree with you, as a very small little dot on the map, we've made a very bold statement. Even though we don't have that many Russian clients. I mean, we have a lot of ships that are registered here in the Bahamas from Russians. But we put ourselves in a very peculiar situation because we have the US on one side, and then we have the Chinese on the other side. And now you have the Ukrainians who are living here asking, what are we going to do? They help their brothers and sisters to find some place to live.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So it's a really touchy thing. And it's like every day you just have to keep watching the news because you don't know what's going to happen next. So they have 3 ships out there. Now the next thing is, are they going to turn those ships away? And the ships are headed here. That's the question they're gonna have to answer.
You're talking about oil tankers?
Yes.
2 of them were turned away last week before this.
And sent where?
They were sent, they were into Freeport and they were sent out because I think the US, they couldn't go to the US. But we didn't allow them to stay.
They didn't have Bahamas flags.
Probably not.
Probably not. Probably not then. But they do have some with Bahamas flags. Mm,
And those
Yeah.
would be the ones that we have no other choice but to take, eh?
they belong to us.
They registered here. Yes, sir.
Registered here. But I mean, I agree with you. It's a very, very ticklish position we're in. Very. Because some people are asking today if someone from the government is going to make an actual speech as to why they made the decision that they made, instead of doing it on the weekend and just sending it out. Because this was done on Saturday. Because it impacts everyone. And so now what that means with that economic order that came up with the list of all those persons, all of those various entities, it means the first step is now every organization has to check their database to see if they have funds or they do business with any of those persons on that list.
But isn't that something that is or ought to be occurring anyway? Isn't that part of your conflict? Well, I guess I'm thinking only because I from an attorney's perspective, you would have to do a conflicts check in any event. And that should be part of it, is that this isn't something new. There are currently economic orders in place for various countries. So the only difference I can see is now we're in the midst of a war, but this is something that ought to be standard in providing those services.
Yeah, but all those names are not on those sanctions.
Right. I mean, that's a new, the list is new. But I mean, in terms of the search, I figured that would have been something that would have been standard for any financial or NIFIs that would be engaging with non-Bahamians.
Yeah, there is the standard check to see if anyone is on a sanctioned list or on any list anywhere, or any negative reports on them. But this one is a little bit more critical, because you have to look at not just the persons on the list, but you have to dig further to the persons who are related to those persons, because a lot of these things are not in their names. So you're gonna have to do a little bit of, especially if they're gonna try to move money now and come in, because they're already here knocking on the door, trying to find ways to move their money. And they're not coming themselves. So you may be surprised, I guess, how much money we actually have here that belong to Russians. Because remember, a lot of them who are oligarchs are PEPs. And there would have been a lot of negative news on some of them. And so it would have been very difficult for them to get into the system. And so they use other people.
Right, that's correct. I mean, as with most of them, most of the non-Bahamians doing business here, there's a lot of money passing through the country that the average Bahamian never sees or hears about.
Yeah. So every financial institution is supposed to have in place an appropriate risk management system, and that's to determine who is the facility holder and who is the beneficial owner and who is the payer. And the identification, this identification should be made prior to establishing or continuing a business relationship. So in most instances, because they know that they are PEPs, most of them try not to conduct business in their own names. The approval of senior management must also be obtained. The financial institution must also identify where the funds are coming from and the source of the funds of the facility holder, and conduct enhanced ongoing monitoring of the business relationships. Now, mostly when for coming from Russia, you see a lot of young persons, very young persons who want to incorporate companies to do business. Most of them are in the IT field, but the amount of funds that they have raises a lot of red flags, especially when they can't substantiate their source of wealth. So a PEP has been defined by the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision paper, Customer Due Diligence, as any individual who are or have been entrusted with prominent public functions, including heads of state or of government, senior politicians, senior government, judicial or military officials, senior executives of publicly owned companies, and important political party officials. And this definition extends to the officials' families, their close associate, and to any business with which the official has a relationship. So that means that even for these oligarchs that are on the economic order, even if you run them through WorldCheck, it would be good if you don't have it to have a add-on so you can see who they are associated with, who are their close friends, and who are their family members. Because that's another way they launder money is through their family members, especially the ones who are not known in high society. A financial institution should consider the following KYC information in mitigating PEP risk. Once it has decided to accept the PEP client, you look at the geography, where they are coming from. Is it a high or low risk jurisdiction? Then you look at the source of wealth. How did they attain the funds that they have? Then you look at their source of funds. Where's the initial funds coming from? And then you look at the commercial rationale. Why do they want to come to the Bahamas to do business? So domestic PEP clients and risk should also be assessed by the financial or lending institution in the context of relevant legal and regulatory requirements regarding client acceptance, risk rating, and monitoring. KYC means know your client. And know your client is information that is obtained and used by an organization to verify a client's identification, gather information about his business, assess and rate the potential risk that the client may present to the organization, make a business decision on whether or not to accept the client and his business. Customer due diligence is additional and or more detailed information that is obtained from a client by an organization in order to update a client's information other than the original KYC information on acceptance. Further assess the potential risk that a client poses to the organization, monitor the client activity, and mitigate and manage client risk. It is important for a financial institution and a financial corporate service provider to establish KYC policies and procedures as part of the due diligence process in order to effectively and thoroughly vet prospective clients and consistently monitor existing clients, particularly those for whom it provides corporate, financial, and fiduciary services. The FTRA makes it mandatory for financial institutions to exercise a risk-based ongoing due diligence throughout the course of each business relationship, which includes the following: ensuring that documents and data, information, and records collected are kept updated and relevant, and undertaking regular reviews of existing records, particularly high-risk facility holders. Scrutinizing transactions to ensure that the transactions are consistent with the financial institution's knowledge of the customer, the facility holder's risk profile, and the source of funds where necessary. ensuring the obligation with regard to high-risk facility holders, politically exposed persons are fulfilled at all times. So one of the primary objectives is to ensure that the clients are of a good reputation and character, and their business activities are lawful within the ambit of the existing laws of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and international best practices as it relates to anti-money laundering, customer due diligence, and corporate governance. So let me pose this question to you now. What if after a search is done of all our databases, we find that there is funds here for persons or for organizations that are on that economic order list, and those funds are frozen? What do you think is going to happen? Because all countries around the world are doing the same thing.
Nothing's gonna happen because that information isn't gonna come out, because once we know just how many PEP or PEPs and other persons on these lists have money here, it's gonna be so bad for business, they're not gonna let it out. So nothing's gonna happen, because you never even hear about these people.
True. But what about the opposite side of it now? Those people who are trying to get access to their funds, the small little island that's blocked their funds.
Then it
Go back
becomes
to-
bad. Then it becomes bad for business for us. We gone are the
Yes.
days of terror papers and all of that. So this is all we have left. And so if we start freezing assets, then we may as well say all those offshore banks are closing out, all those law firms that deal with commercial services, corporate services, close down, or they have to downsize. It's really bad for business. So that's why I say nothing will come out.
Yeah, but like Kwame said, this is going to be rough. This is going to be rough. Because even the companies that pull out of Russia, you see, Russia has already made a statement in that regard. Anyone read that today? All of McDonald's and Apple, those that moved out of Russia.
I didn't get to read, I didn't get to catch the news, but it seems like because a lot of these larger countries, their economy could sustain that. Well, we rely primarily on financial services. Sorry, my toddler's trying to get everybody's attention. But
Okay.
where we rely on tourism and financial services, we can't afford to take the same bold steps that other larger countries can. We can't
Agree.
afford for McDonald's to pull out or you know.
Okay, yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, Ms. Archer. Russia stated that any of those countries, if they don't continue to do business, it will seize its assets.
That's right. And now those
So
companies,
it
that
says
they go-
it'll seize its assets and allow anyone else who want to continue doing business in their company's name to control them.
yes. And those companies said that they're going to sue Russia. But Russia's going to change its law and put it into effect.
See, the problem, Ms. Archer, with suing Russia at the end of the day is if their economy ain't nothing now, what you can get out of it.
They
That's
have
the
money,
problem.
but they have
Um,
money.
No, but what I'm saying is they may have money, but remember now that if I remember correctly, the other day their ruble or whatever their currency is called dropped such dramatically based on the sanctions that was implemented.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
Kwame also bear in mind, Russia has 900 billion in foreign reserves.
And again, those foreign reserves, because someone get depleted also. Who said they can be able to use the foreign reserves at the end of the day based on the sanctions?
But I remember now, even the contracts that Russia has out there with other countries, those contracts are in US dollars. They're not in rubles.
I agreed, but those US contracts based on what's happening right now, at the end of the day,
King money
get
while
shut
this war's
down,
going on.
get shut down based on what's happening.
But a lot of these countries can't make it without oil and natural gas. Because they had in the paper that Italy is suffering. It needs gas. Companies,
And to add to it is winter.
exactly. The companies can't use, they said the ships can't go out. People who do fishing, they can't pay for the gas to run the ships. So yes, on one side, the sanctions are good, what they're trying to do, but at the same time, they're hurting themselves. So that's something else you have to look at. Now, the thing with all of this sanction going on and in everyday transaction, an institution has to know or has to be cognizant of the fact when they have some suspicion on any transaction or proposed transaction. And remember now, with all of this war going on in Ukraine and Russia, this is also a good time for terrorists because it's a distraction. And so you're going to soon see movement in that area.
Well,
So
the good thing, well, the good thing
Go
with
ahead.
all of this right now is that COVID is no more.
Well, don't forget now, China just blocked the whole town with 9 million people.
No, I only said that to say that COVID isn't in the news anymore.
No, COVID isn't in the news anymore. No, but COVID is still out there. It's still out there. So the regulators are expecting that suspicious transaction reports will be filed. And during this time, it should be heightened. So the report sets out and contains the grounds for which a financial institution holds a suspicion about a particular client and or transaction or series of transactions that may involve the proceeds of criminal conduct. I don't know if you've seen this, but we have a lot of foreigners who purchase land in the Bahamas, and there have been instances where those funds are from ill-gotten gains, such as Ponzi schemes. So they would come here with funds from companies that appear to be legitimate, but the source of that wealth is from Ponzi schemes, where they've defrauded people of millions of dollars. So to file an STR with you have to put the name and address, date of birth and occupation of each person conducting the transaction. You also have to put the name and address of any person on whose behalf the transaction is conducted. You put the account, the type and identifying number on the account, the name of the person in whose name the account is operated. You have to identify who the signatories, the nature of the transaction, the amount involved, amounts, the date of the transaction, the name of the officer, employee, or agent of that financial institution, and the name of the person who prepared the report. There are some KYC best practices. And you always should get the full name and at least 2 addresses, two telephone contacts, the nationality, the occupation, and the date of birth of the client, of the ultimate beneficial owner of the companies. You should also request reference letters, bank reference, character reference, and bank references. The references must be on original letters on the letterhead of the law firm or accounting firm or bank. It should indicate the nature of the relationship with the ultimate beneficial owner and principal, and should be at least 6 months old. Copies of the relevant pages of the passport, and they should be notarized. Copies of a recent utility bill. Or copies of the ID bill, driver's license, voter's
We have Tony with her mic on.
Yeah, checking right now to see who that was. Oh yeah, that's Tony. She did it. She did it. Yeah. So there are some offenses in the real estate sector: forgery, fraud, tax evasion. No.
She's back.
There are a lot of
Tony 7 class.
Okay, she did it. She did it. So some of the offenses in real estate is fraud, forgery, tax evasion, embezzlement, and violation of specific statutes relating to real estate sector. So let's turn to my document I sent to you. Speaks about money laundering financing through the real estate sector. Turn to page 7. It says, in order to misuse real estate sector, a number of methods and techniques, mechanisms, and instruments are available. Many of these methods are in and of themselves illegal acts. However, certain of them might be considered perfectly legal if they were not associated with a money laundering or terrorist financing scheme. Through examination of case examples from past money laundering and terrorist financing cases, this study has identified a series of the more common or basic methods and then grouped them according to type or typology. So one way is use of complex loans or credit finance, the use of non-financial professionals, the use of corporate vehicles, the manipulation of the appraisal or valuation of a property, the use of monetary instruments, the use of mortgage schemes, the use of investment schemes and financial institutions, and the use of properties to conceal money generated by illegal activities. So let's look at the one for mortgages. Let me give you the page. I don't want trust accounts. Legal arrangements, shell companies. Okay, the first, I see one here, manipulation and appraisal or valuation of a property. Manipulation of the real value of properties, that's page 17. In relation to real estate, involves the overvaluing or undervaluing of a property, followed by a succession of sales and purchases. A property's value may be difficult to estimate, especially in the case of properties that might be considered atypical, such as hotel complexes, golf courses, convention centers, shopping centers, and holiday homes. This difficulty further facilitates the manipulation when such property is involved. Any of you seen any of these under or over valuation of these complex properties, such as hotels, holiday homes? So the technique consists of buying or selling a property at a price above or below its market value. The process should raise suspicions, as should the successive sale or purchase of properties with unusual profit margins and purchases by apparently related participants. As often used structure is, for example, the setting up of shell companies to buy real estate, and shortly after acquiring the properties, the companies are voluntarily wound up, and the criminals then repurchase the property at a price considerably above the original purchase price. This enables them to insert a sum of money into the financial system equal to the original purchase price, plus the capital gain, thereby allowing them to conceal the origin of their funds. In the case of successive sales and purchases, the property is sold in a series of subsequent transactions, each time at a higher price. Law enforcement cases have shown that these operations also often include, for example, the reclassification of agricultural land as building land. The sale is therefore fictitious, and the parties involved belong to the same criminal organization or are non-financial professionals in the real estate sector who implicitly know the true purpose of the transaction or unusual activity. In addition to placing obstacles to discovering the true identity of the owners of the property and the real origin of the funds used in the transaction, these constructs usually have a significant tax impact, as they generally avoid the liability for capital gains taxes. So, use of a lawyer when buying a real estate. That's page 18. A lawyer created several companies the same day with ownership through bearer shares, thus hiding the identity of the true owners. One of these companies acquired a property that was an area of undeveloped land. A few weeks later, the area was reclassified by the town hall where it is located so that it could be urbanized. The lawyer came to the property registry and in successive operations transferred the ownership of the property by means of the transfer of mortgage loans constituted in entities located in offshore jurisdictions. With each succeeding transfer of the property, the price of the land was increased. The participants in the individual transfers were shell companies controlled by the lawyer. Finally, the mortgage was canceled with a check issued by a correspondent account. The check was received by a company different from the one that appeared as acquirer on the deed. Since the company used a correspondent account exclusively, it can be concluded that this company was a front company set up merely for the purpose of carrying out the property transactions. After investigation, it was learned that the purchaser and the seller were the same person, the leader of a criminal organization. The money used in the transaction was of illegal origin, drug trafficking. Additionally, in the process of reclassification, administrative anomalies and bribes were detected. So what were the indicators and methods identified in the scheme? The instruments were checks and cover payments. The mechanisms were correspondent bank accounts. The techniques were business account, front company customer, purchase of real estate, cross-border transactions, incoming wire transfer, reverse flip real estate, unknown source. The opportunity taken is the use of a lawyer when buying real property and performing bank transactions through correspondent bank accounts. Since the correspondent bank account was not used for any other transaction, it can be deduced that the lawyer set up the correspondent account for the purpose of carrying out the property transactions. Any comments?
There was, I think, I can't remember the name of the organization, but isn't there a effort by the government that all registered companies have to be uploaded into this database to which the Attorney General also has access to. And so you can't really set up a company without disclosing who the beneficial owner is.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then too, I mean, I guess I'm unclear on how the attorney is able to do half of the things that they did in the scenario, because I don't know that you can open an account, for example, for somebody else, or other than if you're holding it in a trust account.
Yeah, you could hold it in trust, but then the lawyers, via the lawyers way, you would provide all of the KYC documents.
But the attorney is required under the act to collect those same KYC documents as the banks.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Mm.
But he's a part of this whole conspiracy, you know.
I can see how, because I'm trying to figure out exactly how he's able to do all of that without, I guess, the person being here or being a part, playing a more substantial role in it.
Well,
I-
this happened in Spain. This actually happened.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things that went wrong in there, I guess.
Yeah.
that they
Oh.
did.
Go to page 19. Case study, use of cash to buy real estate. A criminal organization operating in Americas and Europe laundered resources generated from drug trafficking through the misuse of bureau de change and exploitation of apparently legitimate real estate businesses in different countries. The criminal organization led by Mr. B sent cocaine from South America to Europe, disguising it in rubber cylinders that were transported by air. The money generated from the trafficking was collected in Europe and forwarded in the same way back across the Atlantic. In Latin American country, Mr. B acquired an existing bureau de change. He changed his name and became its main shareholder and general director. With the purchase of an already constituted financial institution, the criminal organization avoided the strict controls implemented by the regulatory authorities as regards to the constitution and operation of the financial entities. In European country too, the criminal organization acquired commercialization companies, created real estate corporations managed by citizens of Latin American country, and opened bank accounts in various financial institutions, declaring as commercial activity trading in jewels, financial intermediation, and real estate activities, among others. Those companies perform unusual transactions, such as cash deposits in amounts above euro 500,000 and immediate transfer orders for the same amounts to foreign accounts belonging to Mr. B's bureau de change in Latin American country 1 and American country 2. Allegedly for investments in the real estate sector. Money was deposited in low denomination currency and some counterfeit notes were identified as well. Intelligence information revealed that the account of the Bureau de change located in American country 2 received during a 1.5-year period deposits of more than $160 million. What were the indicators and methods identified in the scheme? Maritime exportation of drugs from America to Europe and cash imports through the same route. Incorporation of jewelry and real estate companies in Europe managed by citizens of Latin American country, 1, to launder the money generated from drugs trafficking. Acquisition of an existing bureau de change in Latin American country, opening several bank accounts in Latin American country 1, American country 2, and Latin American country 3. Cash deposits in amounts above 500,000 euro on behalf of the real estate corporations located in Europe and immediate transfer orders for the same amounts to foreign accounts belonging to Mr. B's bureau de change in Latin American country 1 and American country 2. Allegedly for investments in real estate sector. Intelligence information revealed that the account of the exchange house located in American country 2 received during a 1.5 year period more than $160 million. No continuity in the resources in the accounts. So see, there are all kinds of different ways in which you can launder monies and purchase real estate. Look at case 5.2 on page 20. A bank's suspicions were raised after a bank check was issued to the order of a notary upon request of an Asian national for purchasing real estate. Analysis of the account transaction showed that the account received several transfers from Asians residing abroad and was known through an investigation regarding a network of Asian immigrants. The analysis showed that the account had been used as a transit account by other Asian nationals for the purchase of real estate. What were the indicators and methods? Instruments were wire transfer, checks, and real estate. Mechanism was a notary and a bank. And the techniques were personal account, purchase of real estate, transit account, incoming wire transfer. And the opportunity taken was the use of a transit account by non-resident nationals for purchasing real estate. So case 6.1 is the use of illegal funds in mortgage loans and interest payments. An individual used a front man to purchase real estate. The value of real estate was manipulated by using a licensed assessor to set up a false, higher but plausible assessment of the market value of the property after renovation. The bank was willing to grant a mortgage on the basis of this false assessment. After the disbursement of the loan, the real estate was paid for. The remaining money was then transferred by the owner to bank accounts in foreign jurisdictions with strict bank secrecy. The renovation never took place. The company finally went into default and the loan could not be reimbursed. What were the indicators and methods? Applying for a loan under false pretenses, using forged and falsified documents. The client persisted in representing his financial institution in a way that was unrealistic or that could not be supported by documents. The loan amount did not relate to the value of the real estate. Successive buying and selling transactions of the real estate were involved. The client has several mortgage loans concerning several residences. Any comments? No one has any transaction that they would have seen that appeared to be suspicious? No? You mean we are as clean as a whistle?
Also, what I would see is it doesn't usually involve real estate. So, and the one that I did see that involved real estate, like nothing ever came of it that this person had laundered money and used it to purchase real estate. I don't even think the court was even able to ascertain where the conveyance was. Like it just was it was handled poorly, I guess, in terms of prosecuting that part of that aspect of the case. But usually I would see in terms of checks and cash moving about, and of course, drugs. So,
Yes. On page 25, it have the case number 6.3, the overvaluation of real estate and the use of third parties to launder funds. The parents of Mr. X purchased a residential property and secured a mortgage with a Canadian bank. In his mortgage application, Mr. Y provided false information related to his annual income and his ownership of another property. The property he had listed as an asset belonged to another family member. Mr. and Mrs. Y purchased a second residence and acquired another mortgage at the same Canadian bank. A large portion of the down payment came from an unknown source, believed to be Mr. X. The monthly mortgage payments were made by Mr. X through his father's bank account. This was the primary residence of Mr. X. Investigative evidence shows that Mr. X made all mortgage payments through a joint bank account held by Mr. and Mrs. Y and Mr. X. Mr. X then purchased a residential property and acquired a mortgage from the same Canadian bank. Mr. X listed his income far higher than the amounts he had reported to Revenue Canada from Company A and Company B. Mr. X made the down payment and monthly payments. Over the 2 years, Mr. X paid approximately 130,000 Canadian dollars towards the mortgage. During this time, his annual legitimate income was calculated to be less than 20,000 Canadian dollars. Mr. X also used his brother, Mr. Z, as a frontman nominee on title to purchase an additional property. Investigators discovered that Mr. Z had stated an annual income of 72,000 Canadian dollars on his mortgage application, listing his employer as Mr. X, although Mr. Z had never worked for his brother and his total income for 2 years was less than 13,000 Canadian dollars. Mr. X made his down payment on this property, and his tenants, who were members of Mr. X's drug trafficking enterprise, paid all the monthly mortgage payments. A total of 110,000 Canadian dollars was paid towards the property until Mr. X and his associates were arrested. Mr. X and his father purchased a fifth property. The origin of the down payment made by Mr. Y was unknown, but is believed to be the proceeds of Mr. X's drug enterprise. Monthly payments made by Mr. X. The use of real estate was one of many methods Mr. X employed to launder the proceeds from his drug enterprise. Recorded conversations between Mr. X and associates revealed that he felt it was a foolproof method to launder drug proceeds. Mr. X convicted in 2006 of drug trafficking, possession of the proceeds of crime, and laundering the proceeds of crime in relation to this case. So what were the indicators and methods? The use of real estate was one of the many methods Mr. X employed to launder the proceeds from his drug enterprise. Recorded conversations between Mr. X and his associates revealed that he felt it was a foolproof method to launder drug money. The only problem he faced was securing a mortgage or loan. So he had to use a nominee to secure the mortgage or to co-sign on the mortgage. A problem surfaced in this investigation when various properties were sold prior to a restraint order being served. This resulted in a portion of the funds being secured in a lawyer's trust account, which could not be restrained. It was the investigators' belief that up to 500,000 Canadian dollars was being held in this trust account. So you see, there are lots of different ways to launder money through real estate. On page 26, case 7.1. On the French West Sea Coast, an individual presented a project to a district planning authority, which involves several real estate project management companies to develop a golf course with 100 villas and apartments on property owned by the authority. The total cost of the operation was very high and was to be funded mostly with funds originating from abroad. The analysis of the FIU revealed that the individual, as well as close members of his family, had already been involved in previous cases transmitted to the judicial authorities, in which the family had been implicated in the laundering of funds originating from Eastern Europe. So what were the indicators and methods? Real estate. Mechanism, bank, district planning authority, real estate project management companies. Technique, purchase of real estate, involvement of a natural person as an intermediary, and high value. And the opportunity taken, the FIU investigations revealed that this individual and members of his family had acted as a front man for persons from Eastern Europe suspected of being linked with organized crime. Any comments? So they said that real estate is commonly acquired in what is known as the integration or the final phase of money laundering. Buying property offers criminals an opportunity to make an investment while giving it the appearance of financial stability. Buying a hotel, a restaurant, or other similar investment offers further advantages as it brings with it a business activity in which there is extensive use of cash. And that's why you see the real estate sector is now one of the sectors that our risk steering committee is really looking at, because especially in family islands, and yeah, mostly in the family islands, there are a lot of foreigners purchasing property who have purchased property and they sell it after a year and a half, some sooner, and the properties keep turning over. And as they sell it over and over again, the prices are doubling. And so you really have to make sure that when you do your due diligence, that you're actually getting the right information as to the source of wealth and the source of funds, as to where the funds will come from to make the monthly payments for mortgages. Any comments? So in your notes in the last section, I have the methods associated with laundering illicit proceeds from the real estate. One is the purchases of real estate using large cash amounts, the use of third parties and gatekeepers such as attorneys and conveyancers, the buying of building material which can be purchased in cash or through successive deposits in the accounts of construction material stores, acquiring mortgage bonds and settlement of bonds using large cash amounts, purposely defaulting payment of mortgage installments and later settling them off using lump sum cash or wire transfer, or using other property or series of transactions, foreign PEPs and nationals investing in real estate, foreign nationals using locals to acquire real estate, the use of corporate structures through buying and or owning companies or corporations which own real estate, and the use of third parties, minors, spouses, and other family members, companies, trusts to register real estate, mainly for tax evasion, and the use of unregistered real estate agents who are not accountable to the regulators. For the vulnerabilities of mortgage that lends itself to money laundering and terrorist financing risk, this risk increases through the use of accelerated repayment schemes by way of lump sum repayments or early termination of the loan. The level money laundering risk in lending through residential and commercial property mortgages may depend upon the nature of the borrower and the nature and size of the mortgage loan. The ways that lending can be abused for the purposes of money laundering and terrorist financing is as follows. The lender may obtain a mortgage loan from a financial institution and use legitimate property as security for loan, but may repay the principal and interest with criminally derived funds. The loan or a series of loans may be used in a complex network of transactions designed to hide the origin and ownership of a criminally derived property, as in the layering process. A launderer may deposit criminally derived funds into a bank or acquire another form of property with such funds and use the property as security for a mortgage. So these are the typical typologies where persons would use mortgages to launder funds. Any comments? No? But tonight is a very short night because I told you all, I know you all knew all about money laundering. And I was right. So next week, we have the duties and liabilities of realtors and contractors. I wanted to ask you all, have you read the environmental impact assessment regulations? And the Impact Planning and Protection Act? Those are two new pieces of legislation.
No, I haven't.
You want me to have Miguel send it to you?
I would appreciate that.
Okay. I'll have him send that to you.
Yes, please.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. When you can send it?
If he doesn't do it tonight, you will get it tomorrow. How that sounds good?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So we'll talk about contractors and realtors. And you should have also a copy of the contractors legislation. You have that? I need to send that too.
Please.
Yes, you could send that too, please.
I need to send that too.
All right. So I'll send the three of those.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So you have enough time now to at least read 2 cases. Correct?
Yes,
And get
ma'am.
that. Yes. All right. So enjoy the rest of your evening. And I will send these 3 pieces of legislation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Good night.
night.
Good night.
Good night.